California lawmakers this week approved the first state-funded guaranteed income plan in the U.S., $35 million for monthly cash payments to qualifying adults. And get this, no restrictions on how they spend the money. The vote showed bipartisan support for an idea that is gaining momentum across the country. Joining me now is Michael Tubbs, California Governor's Special Advisor for Economic Mobility and Opportunity, also the former mayor of Stockton, California, and the founder of Mayors for Guaranteed Income. Michael, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being with us. For those who don't know, you were a trailblazer when you instituted a guaranteed income program as mayor of Stockton. I know California's plan is going to be taxpayer funded. Tell us how it's going to work and who qualifies.
Yeah, well, first, let me just say thank you so much for having me. And yesterday was a big day for guaranteed income because not just this California allocation, but the child tax credit, which is essentially a guaranteed income for families with children, started yesterday. In California, under the leadership of Governor Newsom and the Assembly, in the Senate, the legislature came together and said, you know what, there's all types of pilots happening throughout the state and in counties and in cities and in nonprofits, and that the state wanted to signal that it's important that the state also invest in these programs. So essentially the $35 million will be a pool of money that mayors and counties can draw from as they begin to do their own pilot programs, with the priority from the legislature being those programs that serve pregnant people and also foster youth.
You know, I don't have to tell you that typically these government assistance programs come with a hitch. They usually have, outlines on what it is you can spend this money for, and they're very specific. It can only be used for housing. It can only be used for food. This money can be used without restrictions. And there are some people who say, they're worried about that. You want to make sure this money is not going toward things that are bad, like alcohol and cigarettes and lottery tickets. Why was not having any restrictions on the way the money can be spent important for this program?
Yeah, this is fundamentally about trust and agency, and also moving away from oftentimes racist tropes of paternalism in terms of our policymaking process. And the notion is simple, that if we can trust people to make the right decisions for themselves and their families. And what we saw in Stockton, where we actually gave $500 a month to families when I was mayor, was that less than 1% of the money was spent on drugs or alcohol or building private aircrafts to go into space. Instead, people spent the money on food, on necessities. And we saw the same thing with stimulus checks. When the government gave one-time payments to people during this pandemic, we saw people spent the money on food, on their children, on being able to take days off so they could go get vaccinated. And I'm excited that the state of California sees the wisdom in such an approach and understands that the best investment we can make is one directly in our people. Because when we give money to rich people through tax cuts and corporate loopholes, no one audits that money. And I would wager or bet that more of that money is spent on drugs and alcohol and open bars than the $500 a month we're sending to folks through guaranteed income programs.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, what about the critics, though, who say, you know what, just giving folks money like that de-incentivizes them to get out and work, and that it actually sort of increases their dependence on the government? What would you say to those people?
They have never lived on $500 or $1,000 a month. No one can live on that amount of money and not work. And also the data, again, from Stockton illustrates that, in fact, the guaranteed income allowed people to work. Because there's all types of barriers to employment are often a function of money, i.e. getting your car fixed, getting your uniform clean, paying for childcare, et cetera, or taking time off your part-time work to go apply for a full-time job. And what we saw in Stockton is that actually those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to go from part-time to full-time work than those who did not receive the guaranteed income, and also 2 times less likely to be unemployed. And again, I think we have to just reckon with reality. The vast majority of people who can work in this country do work. If people don't work, it's for really logical reasons. Maybe they're doing child rearing. Maybe it's cheaper for them to stay at home and watch their child than to work minimum wage and give that entire check for someone to watch that child. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they're terrified because we're still in the midst of a pandemic that has health impacts that we still don't wholly understand.
We saw Andrew Yang run for the Democratic presidential election and lose. But a big part of his platform was the idea of universal basic income. I know that you want the next step of this idea of guaranteed income to go federal. But does it really have a shot? Does it have a better shot of actually becoming a reality if state legislatures pick it up?
I think state legislatures could follow the lead of Governor Newsom in California in allocating money for their localities to pilot. But because city governments, county governments, and state governments can't deficit spend, that we have to balance our budget every single year, a real program has to be at the federal level. But what we can do is provide the data and the examples and the political cover and courage for our friends in Congress to do what's necessary and right for folks at this time.
Do you think
also say we...
Yeah, go right ahead.
I was going to say, but we also have a federal guaranteed income program as of yesterday. It's not for everyone, but it is for 90% of families with children. The child tax credit. It's a monthly check to parents every month, at least during this pandemic, just for being parents, with no strings attached, with no requirements on how to spend the money. And that's a huge first step. And now we just have to fight to make sure it's permanent.
Real quick, Michael, in the 30 seconds I have, going forward for programs like these to be really sustainable, does it need to be a partnership between public and private companies and institutions?
I think we've had enough pilots, honestly. I think it has to be a policy. So we need a federal policy. We need a federal guaranteed income. And these pilots and these public-private partnerships like the one in Stockton are important first steps, but they have to be first steps towards a larger journey of getting to a federal policy.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Michael Tubbs, the special advisor to California's Governor Newsom. Always good to see you. Thanks so much for stopping by.